You know, I love podcasting. I have since 2006, back when you had to use like a Dixie cup with string to make the thing work. And that's why I'm so excited that we recently moved Mysterious Goings On to Anchor FM to record our podcast. I gotta tell you, I don't regret it a bit. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Not going to lie to you, when I first heard about Anchor, I was a little dubious because I've been doing it the hard way for so long. But I got to tell you, it's very easy. Use a Stripe account. Get sponsors. You're not paying monthly hosting fees. The sound quality is great. The distribution is phenomenal. Friends, download the free Anchor app today if you want to start your own podcast, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Remember, you heard it here first on Mysterious Goings On. Welcome, Mysterious Goings On. This is Alex Greenwood. I'm thrilled that you're back with me. I think we're having a fantastic summer and getting into fall with some fantastic guests in the creative arts and in different fields. Because as I've said previously, as a writer, myself, I value understanding what drives people to create, to do things. Sometimes it's purely money. Sometimes it's just for the satisfaction of doing it. Sometimes it's both. And I think we would not be complete in talking to the guests we're having this season, which include actors and product designers, writers, chefs. We wouldn't be complete if we didn't talk to a photographer. And I am very excited and, frankly, feel very lucky to have with me a gentleman who I consider to be the photographic poet laureate of Kansas City. Thrilled to have Duane Hallock on the show. Duane, welcome to Mysterious Goings On.
Thank you. I'm honored to be with you. I've followed you on social media for quite some time and listened to your podcast, and it's fun to talk to you.
Oh,
thank you.
Well, thank you. You strike me as somebody who, even though I mean, you had a career in marketing. I know that, and we can get into your history in a minute, but I know you had a very big career in marketing, and I think we first met years ago when I first came to Kansas City when I worked at KCPT. I think we had a phone chat about something because you were, I believe, at the American Red Cross here, and I was with them, and
yes.
And we just always kind of, I don't think we kept in touch, like, talk very often, but we knew who each other were. And then social media springs up and we start following each other. And what's interesting is I think I initially followed you on Instagram, not fully realizing at the time what a great photographer you are. And I was just like, oh, I know that guy. I'll follow him, see what happens. And then all of a sudden I just keep seeing in my feed these beautiful portraits of this community I've grown to love, Kansas City. So is that right, though? If we kind of look back a little bit we look back behind us a little bit here, your career for the longest time was that mostly marketing and PR and things like that?
Yes, I spent a little more than 10 years as the communicator and marketing person for the American Red Cross locally. And then prior to that, I was with a couple other nonprofits, the United Way. I was the VP of marketing there. And prior to that, in administration at a local hospital.
Yeah, we have some things in common. Yeah, I worked PR at a hospital when I started my career, and I worked for the American Heart Association. So you and I have kind of swum in some of the same waters. It's kind of interesting to hear. But photography, I looked a little bit on your website, and I'll let you tell the story. But you've always been interested in photography. But kind of how did it grow for you? What happened with photography? Was that something you picked up more once you left the Red Cross, or how'd that work?
Well, I'm old enough that I remember the good old days of dark rooms and the smell of chemicals and shooting on film. And, I enjoyed that, but it wasn't as much fun. I still did photography through the years. I, shot everything as a hobby, from U.S. presidents campaigning to volcanoes erupting and the obligatory family reunions and birthday parties and graduations. But I really found my niche when Instagram came along. And I just started experimenting with it, and more I started liking digital photography much better than the old stuff that I learned with. And it became more of an artistic expression. And honestly, I started Instagram just throwing stuff on there to be clever and to be, cute, and just photograph, what shoes I was wearing. I mean, we all started somewhere, and
right.
I'm not, it wasn't anything but I've left those up. If someone's interested, they could go way back and see those. I left them up to kind of document my journey in photography. And more I started finding my groove, my niche, and I have enjoyed photography as a hobby. And I still don't really consider it a business for me, but it's one where I've made a few dollars here and there, but it's not my driving motivation.
Well, I'm kind of with you on that. I've been told I have a decent eye for photography. Like, I know how to generally frame a shot. You can't usually tell from my Instagram because, frankly, Instagram to me is a laugh. I don't spend a lot of time on a curated aesthetic or anything like that. But I've been told that. But like you, I read up on you a little. You took photography classes, but you got bored because they spent all this time talking about f-stops and film speeds and apertures and all these important mechanics. But I love what you said is that you understood it was important as a means to an end, but you wanted to learn more. You wanted to understand photography as a form of artistic expression. You were getting beyond the tools to do the job. And I can only say that I feel the same way so much. It's like there's shows about podcasting. It's like I don't really care about how podcasts are made beyond, can mine sound okay? Does it, it's not embarrassing. I don't really need to know exactly what kind of microphone people are using or sound dampening equipment or editing software. It sounds to me like that's your feel for photography.
Well, it is. And I'm amused when people talk about photography in terms of the mechanics of it. I'm not offended, but I am amused when people say, well, what kind of camera do you use? Well, that's kind of like asking a writer, what kind of word processing software, what kind of keyboard do you use?
Amen.
It's a means to an end, but it's not the end itself. And it's important to know f-stops. I don't want to minimize that. It's important to know apertures and the good old days film speeds and, how to frame a picture and all of that. But those are mechanical things that I learned and then wanted to move on from that. I've attended a couple of photography classes here in the area, and they tend to be more camera clubs. And there was a lot of discussion around the mechanics and other such. And I'm not too impressive with when I go to those, because I was told going into one of them as a visitor that I'd be asked to stand up and announce whether I shot with Canon or Nikon. Well, I stood up and said, I shoot with a point-and-shoot Sony camera. And I got a little bit of applause, but it was more out of sympathy, I think, because these are hardcore photographers, and I don't really consider myself a hardcore photographer. And then other people will come along and say, well, what do you edit with? Photoshop? Well, I have Photoshop on my computer. I haven't used it in years. I use a free app called Snapseed, and I do it on my iPad.
Yeah.
So it's a point-and-shoot Sony camera. It's a nice camera, and it captures a lot of data that then allows me to edit it. I'm a pretty simple guy when it comes to the hardware of photography.
It blows me away because I look at your work, and I'm going to tell listeners right now, while you're listening, it would not hurt at all for you to go to DuaneHallockPhotography.com, and that's spelled DuaneHallock photography.com, and look at his portfolio. Duane, you have a very painterly style. I don't know if that's the right word. I think that's a compliment, by the way. Everything to me,
well, thank you.
It looks, some of it could be like an oil painting. Some of it could be maybe trend towards watercolor. But what I see here is you don't do the usual stuff. And your muse seems to be Kansas City, and I assume mostly because you live here, but you can tell us more about that. But your muse seems to be Kansas City and the surrounding area. And what I delight in when I look at your work is I live here and have lived here for over 12 years, and I've seen most of these places. And what I delight in, though, is I see them differently through your eyes.
Well, I appreciate your saying that. In fact, that's one of the highest compliments that anyone has given me. I've had several people say, well, I've lived in Kansas City my entire life, and I've never really noticed that, or I've never seen it like that. And others will say, well, you make me proud. And honestly, that is the most gratifying result that I think I can get out of my pictures. I appreciate that. Partly because I think Kansas City is such a beautiful place. I grew up in Colorado. Oh. I went to college in Tennessee. I moved to Kansas City from Oregon. And I know what people think, or actually more precisely what they don't think of Kansas City. It's just a flyover place.
Yeah.
I used to drive through here on I-70, and, it wasn't that impressive, to be honest with you. But I am so impressed with the beauty of this area of Kansas City. I really wouldn't want to live anywhere else. And I know with my work with the Red Cross, I would travel across the nation for different disasters and all. And another compliment that I got from people, I still remember one guy from Seattle that I got to know on a disaster assignment back in New York City. He says, Duane, I've never been to Kansas City, but your photographs make me want to visit there. He says, I had no idea it was that beautiful. And I'm not really doing this as for the Chamber of Commerce or the Visitors Bureau or anybody else, although they appreciate my pictures. I'm just doing it because I want to show my high school buddies and college friends and colleagues across the nation Kansas City is a pretty cool place.
It truly is. I mean, as I said, I moved here. I grew up mostly in Oklahoma City and then was in Nebraska for a few years and then came here following a lovely lady who became my wife who worked at Sprint. So, and I fell in love not only with her, but I fell in love with Kansas City. Oklahoma City and Kansas City are not terribly different in a lot of ways. And Oklahoma City has many beautiful things. I do still miss the Oklahoma City sunset, to be honest with you. I miss those, that brilliant orange. And I know you can get it here too, but to me, it's not quite the same. But I fell in love with Kansas City as well. And your work just reinforces that. And it's interesting that you say your friends see that, because I've actually shared your pictures a few times over the years with people and said, this is Kansas City, Even
thank you.
The iconic. Well, thank you. Even the iconic shuttlecock at the Nelson Atkins. You've got such a beautiful take on that. I mean, because everybody's got a shot at that, I think. But yours to me is exceptional. I like the angles you take, and if you're looking on the portfolio online, I hope you'll agree. So you've turned this. You say you're not making money on this and all that, but you do offer a calendar, do you not? And you also offer prints and things like that.
I do. I have produced a calendar. Don't sell a lot of those each year, but it's enough to, kind of have fun doing it. It's a pictorial calendar that I offer for sale in the October, November, December time frame. And I do post my pictures online. Started out as more of a convenience. I would have people ask if they could get a copy of something, or different editors of local publications ask if they could use my picture. It was just easiest to say, well, here it is, go to the website. And, others would want pictures, and I've sold a few that are in coffee shops or a hospital, not one that I used to work at, and just purchased several to put in a patient area, which I found flattering that they would do that. You mentioned the shuttlecock. I want to go back and talk about that for just a bit. One of the things that I approach photography with, and writing, is that I absolutely detest clichés. And I try and do everything I can to avoid saying something that's a worn, trite phrase, or shooting a picture that I've seen 1,000 times before.
Right.
And the shuttlecock is one of the iconic figures here in Kansas City. Probably the best example to me is the Liberty Memorial.
Yeah.
I used to work not far from there, and I have shot thousands of pictures. I can probably say that without exaggeration. Shot thousands of pictures at the Liberty Memorial. I've seen a whole lot more than that. And after a while, they all kind of start looking the same. To me, it always became a photographic and creative challenge to return to a place I've been 1,000 times before and find something new. So I like to go to the Liberty Memorial and look for something or shoot something that I've never seen before or never photographed before. Yeah. And it can be from a different vantage point. It can be from a different lighting angle.
Oh, yeah.
It can be a different time of day or a different season. And I love shooting in inclement weather. Usually my inclination is when the weather's snowy or rainy or thunderstorms to stay inside or go to the basement. I don't go out when it's dangerous like tornadoes, but right. I love inclement weather because it creates such interesting and intriguing moods that I like to capture on film, digital.
And for those who aren't from Kansas City, the Liberty Memorial is kind of our shorthand for the National World War I Museum. And it is a memorial, and it's a tower that you can go up in, and there's an eternal flame on top. And Duane, forgive me, is that still lit? I'm not even sure if it's still going.
It was off for a while. I think they have lit it for certain occasions, but I have not focused on that in my photography.
Right. But it's a gorgeous plaza, and the museum underneath it is phenomenal. And I want to talk more about your subjects and about what you're doing. But first, I wanted to ask you though. So you got a lot of personal gratification out of photography, from what you just said about how you find different challenges. Basically, you go to things that are shot a million times before, and you find something new, some other aspect of the piece's personality for you to exemplify. But then, as I understand it, some things started happening with you personally that might have affected that. Maybe you could let us know what happened, particularly in the fact that you had a direct challenge to your ability to be a photographer.
Well, back in 2004, I went for what I thought was a fairly routine eye check, and I was referred to a retinal specialist and thought I'd be in and out of there fairly quickly. Ended up being there for about 4 or 5 hours as they took different tests. And finally, the doctor came in and says, well, you have a large, well-developed tumor inside your eye on your retina. And it turned out to be melanoma. And fortunately, I beat the odds and, beat cancer. I went to Boston for some very specialized cancer treatment. But I lost my eyesight in my left eye, so I now have half the vision, half the eyesight that I used to have. And a strange thing that, to me it was strange, it was fun but and exhilarating, but when I lost, I appreciated the other half that was still remaining. And I started being aware of things that I had never noticed before. And I started capturing that on film. But I would look at things and think, I've never seen that before. I just started appreciating the beauty. And I often say that I focus on capturing beauty that is hidden in plain sight. It's always been there. I just never noticed it before. So for me, photography is almost a practice of mindfulness, of being aware. And looking for things that, I'm not trying to find things that nobody else has seen. I'm trying to find things that I've never seen. So I'm not really trying to impress people with my photography. I'm trying to just capture my sense of gratitude and abundance living in the Kansas City area. For things like that. We spoke offline, and I had a scare. I recently, and there's an episode, by the way, listeners of the show, called On Losing It that I did a while back at the end of the last season about this, where I went, just like you, I went to the eye doctor for what I thought would be a pretty innocuous in and out thing. And they told me I probably had glaucoma, which I freaked out. So now, I don't at present have it. I'm still at risk for it, but I don't have it. But what I guess is, I don't know what the right word. It's not interesting to hear, but it's meaningful for me to hear you talk about it this way because, Duane, I'll be straight up. I thought, oh my gosh, what if I have this in it and they can't control it and I lose my vision, right? Yeah. You could relate to, and I could relate to your podcast. I listened to it I was fascinated. I really was.
Oh, thank you. It's just terrifying, though. I mean, and I'm sure, and I don't want to drill down into things that are too unpleasant to think about, but it had to have been terrifying to hear this diagnosis. But it sounds to me like once it sunk in, you just matter-of-factly took care of business. Is that a fair way to put it, or did you have a little more stress about it than that, or how did you feel about it?
Well, it was a stressful thing, but I came to the conclusion that there's not much that I can do other than, pray about it and have the best medical care that I could get to work on it. And then I just thought, I'm just going to live life. And living life to me was being grateful for each new day and looking for the beauty and the abundance that I find. And that's where the mindfulness comes in. To me, it's almost a meditative process to go out on a photo shoot. I have a lot of people say, hey, I'd love to go with you on a photo shoot. Well, for one thing, it's kind of my personal time in many ways. And I don't mean to be selfish about that, but it's also much more impulsive than people think.
Yeah.
I ask my wife sometimes, hey, you want to go with me to downtown and I'm going to shoot some pictures? She says, what are you going to shoot? Well, I don't know. I'll discover it once I'm there. So I don't always have the pre-planned itinerary and shot list, if you will, when I go out on a photo shoot. Sometimes I find it's worth posting. Other times I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. I'd never noticed that before.
Yeah, and again, if you're not taking photos, that might, somebody with you might be. Not intentionally, but might be kind of putting a drag on you a little bit because you could feel like maybe I've been out shooting with people before myself, and I could feel them like their impatience. Like, can we go to lunch now?
Yeah. You mentioned other photographers. If I could just interject there.
Sure.
A lot of times I have people. I shouldn't say a lot, but more often than I'd like, people saying, "Wow, I wish I could shoot pictures like you," or. And I don't say that in a self-congratulatory way, but my response is always never compare yourself with anyone other than the photographer that you used to be.
Oh, nice.
And I also appreciated your podcast about, in your case, comparing yourself or not comparing yourself with other writers.
Oh, thank you.
To me, there's no sense of competitiveness. There are many photographers in Kansas City that I admire their work. I'm inspired by them. I don't want to be them, nor do I want others to be like me, but I am collaborative and I appreciate the community of photographers here. And I honestly feel no sense of competition with them. I don't compare my work with them. I compare my work with the Instagrammer or photographer that I used to be. And hopefully I'm getting better with each and every passing year and each and every snap of the shutter.
I think that's so true. Because I had to get to that level of maturity myself about my writing and understand that there's a few rules about writing I understand. Let me see if these work for you a little bit in photography. First things first is, you are limited by, I think, well, to a degree, you're limited by your capacity for discipline and hard work, first of all. I'm sure with photography, it's the same as writing. If you don't write a lot and you don't read a lot, you're not going to get better. So I would assume photography is very similar. The other thing is that what I offer my readers is my take, my direction, my angle when I approach fiction. And I, just like a photographer, what you said earlier, you're not offering, you may be photographing things people have seen before, but this is through your eyes. This is through Duane Hallock's vision. This is how you take that image and then work on that image and make it, as I said, painterly and that. So I think those are a couple of things. I agree with you so much on that, but it took me a long time to get there. When I was a younger man, I was very, well, how come they got published and I didn't? Or, why isn't this happening? But you can't look at it that way. And that's one reason too, just to put a pin in what you said too about your alone time. And writing's a very solitary thing. I mean, I cannot imagine a more boring thing than to watch somebody write.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but all you said right there was very well said. I mean, it reflects my feelings exactly. We're on the same line. You from more of a written medium, me from more of a visual medium, but we're parallel with our philosophy on that.
I think so, and we're both telling stories just in different ways. And I'm trying to paint pictures with words, and you're almost literally painting pictures with images, and made all the more poignant, all the more special, considering what's going on with your vision, your physical vision, but that you make work so well. Well, let me ask you a few quick questions, if you don't mind, about your work. Now, there's something I see here as I look, and I've looked through your portfolio quite a bit, and as I said, I've been a fan for years. You're apparently, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, of course, apparently not a big fan of people in your work. True or false?
Well, that's mostly true. Partly by default, because when I'm out shooting, I shoot on my own. I also worked at the Red Cross for, like I say, more than 10 years. And the requirement there was that whenever we shot anyone who was identifiable, we needed to have a photo release.
Oh, yeah.
And so, getting the photo release, I tried to be more artistic and shoot over their shoulder, or so they weren't identified. And anymore, I find the beauty of the landscapes, the architecture, the nature, and other things that I shoot just usually work best without people. And I will say that I am asked from time to time if I will shoot pictures of different things, weddings or senior portraits or family photos or even modeling sessions. As much as I would find those interesting, there's so many other photographers who do that much better than I. And that's not my niche. I also don't really consider myself a photojournalist. So I'm not really looking to document the reality through a visual medium. I'm there more, and I don't know that I like this term, but I kind of think of myself as more of a photo artist. And you had used the term painterly. There was a while where, I loved editing my pictures. There was a while when people would say, well, that looks almost like a painting. And the more I looked at it, it was over-edited. I would oversaturate colors. I would, use filters and other things just because I could. And I have come to the point where, to me, photo editing is kind of like women, or I guess some men who wear makeup. It's best when you don't really notice the makeup.
Yes.
And the same with editing. It's best when it's not obvious. But I do edit my pictures, and I'm unapologetic about that. But I try and do it in a way that doesn't call attention to the editing.
Right.
I like to edit my pictures so that I capture how I want to remember that scene, and not necessarily how the camera mechanically captured that scene in pixels. So it's more, how do I want to remember that sunset or that foggy morning at the Liberty Memorial or something like that. It's that's my style in editing.
And I appreciate that too, because you can, I've fooled around with editing software, and I know how I can take which was a decent shot, and then I just goof with it so much it looks terrible. So, and I never show those to people, but so it's easy to do with all the technology. It's not that you're against people per se, and I appreciate that, but I did notice that, and I did not want people to be led to believe that they were stark and that they lacked humanity or emotion. It's quite the opposite. What I think is so fascinating about it is that you've got all this emotion in these photos, and there aren't people in them by and large. I could see where you're at Loose Park. You couldn't help but have a few people in the background. You can't identify them because, Loose Park is where everybody goes to photograph themselves and people here in Kansas City. I've got the one we paid a photographer when my daughter was 2 or 3 to throw leaves in the air and smile. That's the Loose Park experience.
Oh, those are fun. Absolutely,
they are indeed. So, what does your family think of your I won't call it an obsession, but of your hobby or what it is, your photography? What does your family think?
Well, my family likes it. They don't really take pictures much, so I'm kind of the lone photographer. And I was flattered just this past spring when we remodeled our house, and my wife said, I want to put up one of your sunflower pictures from Grintner Farms in our new newly remodeled kitchen. So we have one of my pictures hanging up, and that was at my wife's request, which I was flattered by that.
Oh yeah, that's I've got a buddy who he writes, and he's like, after my fourth or fifth book, I couldn't get my wife to read anymore. So it's quite a nice thing when they want to see it hanging up in the house. So I like that. I like that a lot. Well, Duane, what is there? And as we wrap up here, it's a two-part question. Okay, the first part is this: what would you want people to think about when they see your work? And then part two, what would you say to people who are like, I kind of think I take a decent picture? What are my next steps to kind of get on track? Maybe you could do a little two-part question there for us.
Well, I guess my thinking is that when people see my pictures, I want them to be inspired. I want them to feel a sense of wholeness and optimism. We live in a pretty stark world, and I deliberately avoid that and try and have my pictures transport people away from that.
Yeah.
I shoot some what I think are pretty beautiful pictures of Brush Creek, but I'm realistic. I mean, I've shot pictures of, beer cans and other stuff in Brush Creek. I'll either edit those out or I'll move downstream.
Yeah.
I don't want people to think I'm, too Pollyannaistic. Is that a word? Pollyannaistic. And overlook overlook the blight and the defects in the city. They're there. But I also think that what we focus on expands. And that's what I try and do with my photography. I focus on the beauty that's there. And the more of it that I capture on film, the more of it I see. And I'm convinced I will never run out of opportunities to shoot pictures like that. In terms of the advice I would give other photographers, be shy about sharing your pictures. Don't feel like somebody's going to be judging them. Just share them. It's a form of artistic expression that I would encourage anyone who wants to share a picture to do so. I like a lot of pictures on Instagram that aren't necessarily well composed or, they're not going to win an award, but I like the picture because it represented the emotion and the creativity of the person who took the picture. So I would encourage anyone to not compare yourself with anyone else, but just share. We all have a voice. We all have an eye. We all have a soul that the world needs to hear from us. And so I would encourage everyone to be yourself and share what you alone can share with the rest of society.
I cannot think of a better way to end our discussion. I'd like to go on, but I know you're a busy guy, and we've got people here that I'm sure fascinated to. If you're not looking at Duane's work right now, please do go look at it. And Duane, again, would you tell everybody where to find you on the internet?
Well, my Instagram and Facebook are just Duane Hallock. Instagram is Duane Hallock, one word. On the internet, it's Duane Hallock, and add the word photography to it, all one word. So I'd love to have you follow me on social media or connect with me there. And also look up Alex. By the way, I just voted for your two podcasts for the awards for them.
Oh,
probably by the time you air this, the deadline for doing that will be over, so you may need to edit this out. But I just did that. And you do a good. I'm glad I discovered your podcast and enjoyed listening to them. Looking forward to the next ones.
Well, I bless your heart. Yeah, this one's a labor of love, and the other one's kind of a lark with a buddy, and it's just really an excuse for him and I to get together and be silly after 35 years of friendship. But I appreciate that vote. And I tell you what, folks, I'm going to put a link to all of this in the show notes for you can find Duane in all his iterations. But seriously, if you're not following him on Instagram, treat yourself, because there's nothing like Duane's stuff to stop you in the midst of a lot of people posting pictures of food. Yeah, I've done that. Pictures of themselves and highly curated stuff, and I just love it when Duane stuff pops up, because you do remind me of the beauty of the world, and I do love that it's not Pollyannish. It's just you you trying to show in this very stark, as you put it, this very stark and unfortunately right now fairly negative world, that there is beauty. And a lot of that beauty is within ourselves, I think. And you, sir,
well said,
have some beauty in yourself. And I appreciate you coming on Mysterious Goings On. And I wish you a good day, and I hope to see you around the web.
It's been my honor to talk with you, and thanks so much, Alex.
You bet. All right. If you want to hear more discussions with creative folks, just check out the feed. It's an Apple Podcast. You can find Mysterious Goings On there. And if you don't subscribe there, we're pretty much everywhere else. And if nothing else, you can listen on your desktop. You can catch that on the John Pilot Mysteries Facebook page. I put links to the show there, or pilotscross.com, where you can find more information about my books and other activities. So it's been a delightful conversation. I've been so blessed to speak with some wonderful creative people, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you will come back next week for another edition of Mysterious Goings On. Until then, keep reading.
It's a great time to get a great deal on a new car when you get approved for an auto loan from PenFed. Our Powered by True Car rates are as low as 1.39% APR on new vehicles. Finance for a longer term to lower your monthly bill. Plus, take up to 60 days to schedule your first payment. Join PenFed, and together we'll keep you moving forward. Anyone can apply. Visit penfed.org/auto or call 1-800-247-5626. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA. A little flexibility can go a long way. By refinancing your new or used auto loan with PenFed, you can lower your monthly payments for more flexibility in your budget. You can even schedule your first payment for up to 60 days from the date of your refinance. Calculate how much you could save at penfed.org/auto-refi or call 1-800-247-5626 to apply. Membership is open to everyone. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA.